Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Brett, TN Artist. So I had somebody ask me if I could do an Alla Prima painting, which is basically a wet-on-wet painting with an ArtRage. So that's what I'm going to do here, is do this. And I decided to do kind of a fiery cave kind of painting, just playing around. Really just wanting to play around with fire and heat and making stuff look hot. So what I've done here in the background is tinted the canvas yellow. And then now I'm taking browns and oranges and going in and laying those in. So you can see how I kind of blending it out with a little bit darker brown on the edge, and then some oranges moving out from there and fading it in. Because the reason is I want this to be kind of rocky looking and kind of smear it around a little bit. So that's what I'm doing. And this is a good way, by having that little bit of darkness that then goes back out to a lighter, brighter orange and so forth. It kind of helps pop the lighter yellows that I'll put in here in a little bit. It really gives it that hot feeling. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just using the oil brush, the Everlasting Oil, and then I picked a couple of oranges through on here, and then all I'm doing after that really is using the Alt key to select the color, and then just kind of keep going back and forth with those colors from there, with the exception being when I choose like the yellows or something and I go in and pick a lighter yellow, then I have to actually go over to the color picker and pick a brighter hue. So you can see that's kind of what I'm doing here. And it's funny how when you pick a color, it looks bright at one hand, but then you put it on, it's like not the color you want. So I had to keep playing with that till I got the one that I wanted. And then when I finally got that bright yellow, it's just a matter of going down the middle and the edges and kind of smearing it in and getting that look. So that's what I'm doing. So I just kind of keep going back and forth and letting the oil work and kind of playing in here. The nice thing about doing colors that are along the same spectrum, so like yellows, oranges, browns, is when you're doing the Alla Prima technique or something like that, is that they don't burn out, they don't oversaturate each other, and you get, cause sometimes if you do complementary colors like blues and stuff on top of the oil paint like this, you can get weird kind of haloing effects. So that's not what I did, but you can see here where I'm blending in and that browns and stuff to kind of change my yellows, and that's what I was wanting to do, was try to play around with that. So that's what I'm doing. You just kind of keep going back and forth and trying to keep the brighter yellow. The brighter yellow is going to be the hotter yellow. The same thing with a fire. The hotter spot is going to be the brighter spot because, obviously it's putting out more energy. So by having the tinted canvas and then playing with that back and forth, I can really push that look throughout the fire and throughout the cavern that I've got here. So this is all one layer. I do go to a second layer here in a little bit, and I'll explain that when I get to it. But this is all just one layer, and just smearing it back and forth to get the different variations and colors. The thing with Alla Prima is that it's a lot of times more impressionistic for it. There are some good examples that get fairly realistic, but the interesting thing with it is the closer you get to it, the more you can tell it was actually smeared. But the farther you are from it, the more natural it can be for blending the colors. So it gives you more of that natural look. So it can get photorealistic looking. Well, not really photorealistic, but get more realistic looking and with it. But it's also easy to spiral out of control with it as well, either digitally or traditionally. So you got to always be careful with it and what you're doing. So here, reduced my brush size, still sticking with the oil brush, and started kind of giving some different wisps of fire, and so playing around with that little stringers of fire. So this is a fun technique. It's a quick technique usually. As far as this goes, this was about 30 minutes of painting, just real relaxed kind of thing. It can be if you do it right, and by right I mean you relax and let yourself play and pay attention. If you're doing it digitally, you got to pay attention to your layers, but if you don't fight it, this can be a very interesting and relaxing technique to get some cool looks. So that's kind of what I was doing here, was just relaxing, painting. Somebody asked me if I could do these kind of things. I was like, yeah. So I haven't done one in a little while because usually I try to control it much more. But I did want to play around with it, and I thought, I wanted to play around with fire and stuff anyway, which is rather organic. So I'll start with that. And then as I was putting it in here, originally I wasn't necessarily thinking about a cavern so much, but then the more I did it, the more I was like, yeah, I think that's kind of what I want to do. So I started playing around with this up here to kind of lay in some shadow areas and areas where it would cool off. And so again, I'm still sticking, that's not even it looks kind of black, but if you notice to the right on the palette, it's not all the way over to the black. So it's really just a dark brown. So putting that in there to get those darker colors, and then really kind of taking to see how I like it as far as giving it some depth and with the light and shadows. So that's what I'm kind of doing here, is again establishing a quote-unquote ceiling and some walls and different dark spots. Because the interesting thing is, when you frame the lighter colors with a darker color, it really brings out that brightness and gives it that hot look. So you'll notice, at least to me, and when I'm looking at this, it got hotter as I added in those darker colors. And so that's kind of what I keep pushing here, as far as trying to play around with it and see how much I can make it really pop off the canvas just from changing the values and stuff. So just playing around. There's a lot of little things you can't really see that I'm doing here every now and then. So when it looks like it's kind of stopped for a little bit, it's either one of two things. Either there's a little section that I'm working on and it's a little bit harder to see because this is sped up. It's sped up twice the time it took me. So I think it's about 18 minutes long. So about 36 minutes is what I spent on this. So it's either that, or my daughter and I were talking at the time that I was painting this. So occasionally I did stop and talk with her, and didn't turn off the recording. So, but yeah, just kind of smearing it in here, not changing the brush size either. You notice that the brush size is pretty much staying consistent. So that's one of the other interesting things with this, is that not playing around with the size of the brush too much. I mean, I did do some of those smaller flames and reduce that, but overall the brush size is staying fairly consistent. And I'm letting the smear of the paint kind of change the way it looks. Like, for example, that little spiral of fire I just did going up, it looks like, if you glance at it at first, like I changed pressure, but I didn't. I just kept the same thing, and then the smear kind of blended it in and faded it out. So here's where I start adding in some of the stalactites coming down from the ceiling. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. I think it's stalactites from the ceiling and stalagmites from the floor. Anyway, so doing that, again, not wanting to put a lot of detail in it, but just kind of play around with the color and the values. So lights and darks, giving me my depth more than anything else. And really, it's there to frame the picture, to kind of give a stopping point for your eyes, because this is a very moving picture as far as that goes for the all the different brush strokes. So it's very chaotic. So you need to have a spot, even if it's just through value, you need to have a spot that both counteracts the weight of the brightness so that it gives it some balance, but it also gives your eyes an area to stop and to control into the painting and keep it so that it's flowing around the painting, but also has a chance to rest. It's really an interesting concept when you think about composition. So that's what these are doing. So you'll notice how it kind of pushes it back again, kind of makes everything seem brighter when you've got that dark in the foreground. So that's what I'm doing here, is putting in more darks in the foreground to give that hint of texture, hint of stones, hint of lava. Like you could just be looking into this dark, not dark, but this cavern kind of thing, and seeing this fire. So, it's an interesting thing. So here in just a second, I'm going to add another layer, and you'll see that I'm putting in these darker colors here. So what I'm doing here in a moment, after I put in a few more highlights, is I wanted to frame it even more with darkness. So one of the best ways to do that for a shadow color is to use a complementary. So there's a lot of oranges in this, so I wanted to put a blue over top of it. So the best way to do this for digitally, because if I put this in the same layer, it's going to have a weird blend. Even though you can set it to realistic blending colors, it's still going to get a weird blend on it that can give you some bizarre haloing for everything. So what I wanted to do was to darken those edges, but I didn't want to use more browns. I wanted to actually use some cool colors on it, so those complementary colors. So in order to do that, I create another layer, and you'll see here in a second where I start putting some blues on here. And that's why. So I'm laying those blues on here to start toning down some of those edges and really kind of pushing your eye back towards that hot center and make it look even hotter. And so by putting the blues on that second layer, I can then adjust the layer properties to being multiply. And that multiply gives me a natural shadow that then overlays that blue and cools down some of that orange. And it really works. It's a great way to do it. You can do the same thing for highlights or shadows. So if your shadows, here it goes. So there you can see the blue that I'm putting on. And all I'm doing is smearing it on for where I think I want to put some darkness. Not even caring at the moment what it looks like, because what I'm going to do is take and put it on here and then take the palette knife and really blend it out to where it's fairly transparent. But it keeps some of that texture, and then from there I can erase it back and kind of make it look how I want. So right now it looks kind of weird, but then when I change the layer properties, and you'll see it goes dark here in a second, and that's what that is. It's me changing it to multiply. But anyway, you can use this is a great way to throw in shadows for when you want colors to be naturally darkened. And you can do the same thing for highlights. You put it on overlay for highlights, and you put it on multiply for shadows. And it gives you that look of the natural highlights and the natural shadows. So again, just smearing it out, breaking it up. Some of the colors were a little too solid there, so I wanted to break them up a little more by erasing them and get kind of the feel I want. And then from there, it's just a matter of switching over to multiply. And once it hits on multiply, you get all like that. You get all those natural textures below, but at the same time, it just makes it more harmonious. So playing around with that just a little bit more, which to me it gives it a much more pop in the middle to be like, okay, this is cooling around the edges and giving you that bright heat in the middle of it. So, and then from there, it's just a matter of tweaking a little bit more, erasing some of it, and then smearing it back and erasing and smearing it back. So this is really just me futzing around with it a little bit. That's F-U-T-Z, by the way. So, yeah. And anyway, so slowly reaching the end of this, I wanted to put a few more rocks and stuff in there, so I've switched back down to the main layer and just kind of playing around with it so that it kind of gives you the feel of a waterfall of lava or something like that, so that it really kind of works. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below or any questions, and just let me know what else I can try to do to help. Thanks.